Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the most disturbing thing you have ever seen or witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
When I was a teenager, I witnessed a car accident right in front of my house. A car ran a red light and T-boned another vehicle. The impact was so violent that one of the passengers was ejected from the car. I ran out to help, but there was nothing I could do. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the image of that moment, the sound, the stillness afterward, and the helplessness has never left me. It made me respect how fragile life is and how everything can change in seconds. Truck versus pedestrian accident in front of my house. I was one of the first to arrive on the scene to help, while others called 911. I thought I'd direct traffic or something because I'm generally useless in emergencies. Shock is one hell of a thing, though. I knew that the pedestrian was in great distress and peril. I knew that something was wrong or different about her leg, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. When some guy tried to help her stand up, I directed all of my attention towards stopping that idiocy. I pushed him away and made her lay back down flat. I sat with her and kept her conscious. After a few minutes, a nurse practitioner who'd been driving by stopped to help me until medics arrived. It took the first responders 20 to 25 minutes to get there, despite the fire station being 1 mile from my house. The pedestrian's leg had been degloved from mid-thigh to ankle, and an arterial artery had been severed. Had I not kept her conscious until the ambulance arrived, and had the nurse practitioner not stopped by to help by using her hands and fingers to clamp the exposed artery shut until the ambulance arrived, the pedestrian would have died. As a happy ending, though, the nurse, pedestrian, and I are all good friends now, and we get together once per month. When I was 5 years old, I was vacationing in Brazil. One night, I was outside playing soccer with my cousin when we heard an explosion. People rushed to see what was going on, and it turns out the gangs in the favela threw a grenade into a bar that had police and civilians in there. All you saw were body parts, debris, and fire. My aunt called my uncle to get us out of my grandmother's house and to take us to his home. He came and picked us up and took us with him. A couple of hours later in the morning, the police came back and shot and killed 21 innocent civilians as payback for the cops that got killed in the bar. I still vividly remember the 21 bodies lined up in a wheelbarrow in the square while everyone was wondering what just happened. When I was 17, I was in a passenger in a car accident and I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. Flew right into the back driver's side window and split my head open on impact. I saw my skull and so much blood when I looked in the mirror. I guess I had so much adrenaline I couldn't pass out. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have. Had to get 14 stitches, and I heard the needle scrape against my skull with each pass. Still gives me shivers when I think about it. When I was 9, my father decided to take his new girlfriend on vacation with us. I've never met her before, and I wasn't allowed my phone because he said I wasn't allowed to contact my mom for 5 weeks. And they decided that she had to blow him not even 5 centimeters next to me while I had to pretend to be asleep because I woke up because of them. Ugh. Coming home from a friend's house, missed my turn for the highway and had to go through town. Watched a lady get hit by a car going way too fast considering they just came from a stoplight. Angled my car to stop traffic, helped her out of the road while my partner called 911. It was an absolute mess. Poor woman was missing teeth, bleeding from her head, and one hand was damn near mangled and didn't resemble a hand anymore. Stayed with her to give statements and make sure the ambulance knew that she had a possible concussion because I saw her head bounce off the pavement twice. Pretty sure her head struck the hood of the car too. I don't remember my dreams, but if I did, I know she's in them. My husband and I were visiting his bandmate's familial's home. and there were kids running around. We had none at the time. Later in the day, I went into the family room and saw what I thought was a doll's leg sticking out of the cushions on the back of the couch. It just looked so weird. My brain was having a hard time processing it. I realized it wasn't a doll, but a baby. I screamed for help and pulled the baby out. My husband's bandmate came running and we performed CPR, waiting for the paramedics. I knew this baby was gone, but we tried. The parent had just left the baby on the couch with slightly older kids. They were jumping on the couch, causing the baby to get wedged and suffocate. Then they just left the room. They were young, too young to understand and be responsible for a baby. Happened almost 30 years ago, and I still see flashes in my mind's eye. Dolls laying in certain ways on couches still make me second guess what my eyes and brain are talking in. I got a big list. One that I thought of immediately was the time that I was working the door at a casino. We had the usual crack zombies that would come in during the early morning, and this one chick walked in while vigorously scratching and picking at her face. Well, she literally ripped off her entire cheek as she walked past and tossed it in the trash can and just kept walking. I'm talking like her entire cheek, probably from the top of her cheekbone, beneath her eye, down to the corner of her mouth, just gone. We went and checked on her to render medical aid, and it was green and rotting flesh. That was where her cheek used to be. It wasn't bleeding or anything. She wasn't in any visual discomfort. She just brushed it off. We went ahead and called EMS for liability reasons, and she refused to be checked out and went about her day. I was a senior in high school when my boyfriend, we had been together the majority of high school, was shot and killed at a party we were at right in front of me. The worst part was we lived in a very rural area in Idaho, and it was winter, so there was no chance getting an ambulance to the area we were at. So we had to just throw him in a truck and drive him 45 minutes in the dark and snow to get him to a hospital. He was still responsive when we started driving, but he died before we made it.
Alright, here's your trigger warning for some animal violence. Some of them don't have as bad an ending. But remember, some of these deal with a lot of dead humans too. And I know the animal stuff is tough for people, but there you go.
I was dog sitting and went over to the house at about 10 p.m. to let the dogs out one last time after I had attended a minor league baseball game. A golden retriever and a lab. The lab needed to be leashed. The golden typically didn't. Unbeknownst to me, a Yorkie was in the yard barking at the dogs through the sunroom door. As I leashed up the lab and opened the door, I registered that there was a little yappy dog making noise. But I didn't expect the golden to make a mad dash for the Yorkie and proceed to brutally kill it right in front of me as I yelled and tried to keep the lab from dragging me over the carnage in order to join in. It was bad. I didn't know who owned the dog, so I had to go to a couple of houses to find out where the little dog lived. The owner said some awful things to me that night. When I was 13, I had a friend who had attempted suicide, changed her mind, and called me. When I got there, I really didn't know what to do, so I just called 911 and held her. She was crying and told me she was afraid to die and begged me to help her. She was brought to the hospital but didn't survive the night. Trigger warning, this involves animal abuse. My biological father was a very disturbed and abusive individual. He would often beat up my mother and abuse any animal in his path. When I was around 4 or so, my father, in one of his usual drunken rages, mutilated and tortured a cat on the front porch of my grandma's apartment while my siblings and I were visiting. Court-ordered visitation. We would see him every other weekend. My siblings and I witnessed him abuse the cat with his bare hands. He broke the cat's legs, bit off one of its ears, set the tail on fire, and repeatedly punched it. Miraculously, that cat did not die. We saw him limping around the complex days later. That was not the first or last time we saw him abuse an innocent animal, but this incident was particularly disturbing and had stayed with me all of my life. He died in 2006 and will never hurt another animal again. Good riddance. Saw EMTs attending a person that had their neck slashed in a bar incident. I was walking by just as the victim was being loaded into the ambulance. There was an obscene amount of blood dripping off the bench. They were helping him on. Can still picture the slow oozing plops of blood. This was in Whistler, BC in early '04. I also saw the NYPD pull a jumper's body out of the East River below the Queensboro Bridge. I accidentally captured part of it on my phone camera. I was taking pictures of the view and saw something in the corner of my eye. The jumper's pants had been pulled down around their ankles, their shirt was up and over their head, and their torso was covered in huge purple and red welts. That was about in January 2020, 2 months before COVID hit. I watched a car on the opposite side of the highway panic during a traffic slowdown. They slid sideways, and as soon as they hit the soft shoulder, the car started rolling. 3 people that were in the car were ejected. I watched 3 high school kids lose their lives. That was about 10 years ago now, and I think about it often. When I was in college, I lived at the bottom of a hill next to the university. Lots of people liked to skate that hill, and there was not a lot of traffic, so it was popular to cruise through there to get some speed to go to the next part of campus. One day, 2 people ran into each other at the bottom of the hill. One was coming from the top of the hill, and the other came from the opposite direction. They didn't see each other and hit head to head. One kid had a helmet and one didn't. Helmet was fine, but the other kid bounced his head off the pavement. I was doing dishes and heard 2 girls screaming bloody murder from my kitchen and could kind of see what was going on through the window. I was the first other person up there, and this poor kid was bleeding out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, seizing violently, and was barely holding on to life. I called 911, and I had a roommate get every towel we had out of the house to try and stop the bleeding. Within the next 10 to 15 minutes, he was getting a helicopter to the hospital, but sadly he never made it out of the coma. Even after EMS washed the scene away, for weeks I could still see the blood trace in the pavement, going from where he was to the storm drain that was probably close to 10 feet away. When I was 11, my parents let myself and younger sister go for a brief road trip to the beach with family friends. On the way back, they got a flat tire. The father of the family and his dad got out to change it. I perched up at the window to watch. Within inches of my face, I saw a caravan being towed by a car take out the back half of the dad, instantly killed, and his father walk as white as a ghost, covered in blood, shocked toward me. He apparently died soon after in the hospital. I saw everything. It changed my life, and now I have PTSD. Horrific, but so glad my brain has protected me to the best of its ability and blocked aspects out. I watched my brother die of self-poisoning when he was 17, blue, cold, dead. I see the play-by-play of my brother seizing on the ground every time I think of him. There was nothing I could do but call 911 and wait for help. That whole night still haunts me to this day. It was on a holiday, too. Now I can never enjoy that holiday again. All it does is bring back awful memories. Friend and her kids got murdered by her husband. Friend's mom and I were the first to find them when my friend didn't show up for work and school said the kids were absent. He's doing life now, but I see Monica and her kids' corpses and smell the blood in my head every day, and I'm starting to think maybe I should see someone about that. Also, another friend, not as close, hadn't heard from her mom for a few weeks, and it turns out she had died with no AC in the middle of August. I helped her do the cleanup after they took whatever remains they could scoop up out of the house. And I remember when we were going around the edges of the room, pulling the carpet from the tack strip so we could just roll it up. I stood up and saw a bunch of hard stuff stuck to my pants. I picked it off and it was teeth. That one wasn't traumatic or anything, really. It was just unpleasant. Also, when I was a kid, I saw a guy beat his girlfriend with a part of a bicycle. Her head was cracked right above the forehead, and it was pretty horrific looking. They were back together before she even left the hospital. The couple had come to buy some stuff from my dad, and she got upset when her man spoke to my mom, or at least that's what I was told when I got older. One more. I was like 7 or 8, and my uncle got into a fight with my mom's ex-boyfriend in our yard, and after he knocked him out, he jumped on his jaw and smashed it. Rest in peace, Uncle Scott. He taught me how to fight and roll joints. One of the weirdest things I saw driving through the mountains was in the middle of the night in Washington State. We were traveling west and saw a ton of emergency vehicles lights ahead. As we passed, there were several cars wrecked, and one was completely crushed to the point where I can't imagine anyone survived. A series of giant rocks, one almost car-sized, had rolled off an adjacent hill and across a field onto the road, where they collided with cars who I'm guessing never saw them. Even in the dark, you could see the path the largest rock had made across the field as it crushed the vegetation. It was like a Final Destination sort of thing in real life. On my wrestling team, we had this one kid who was legit psycho. He was also one of the only kids on the team that used the shower after practice or matches in the locker room, but a lot of us had to pass through there to get to the locker room, so you'd see him in the shower. One day I witnessed him squat, insta-shit, and then waffle stomp the shit in the shower drain. It happened in like 5 seconds or less. Barely had time to process what I just saw. When I was 10 or 11, I was put into a school called the Autism Academy, a school for children with developmental issues. The teachers would tell us to ignore the screaming in the halls, and I quickly found out why. Kids who were deemed volatile, aka anyone who was upset, crying, having a breakdown, or actually being violent and lashing out, would be physically restrained and taken to the sensory playroom. In that room was a door that led into an old padded room. The pleather was peeling off of the foam padding, and it reeked of piss. I got locked in there quite a lot due to having a frequent mental breakdown. Once you were put in there, they wouldn't let us out unless they considered us calm enough to do so, which means you would be forced to piss and shit yourself, and if you were put in there before lunch, you never got to eat that day. There were some small rectangular windows near the ceiling, the kind of windows that don't fully open. I tried to climb the windows to the back of the door to try and escape through one of these windows. The teacher's aide that was holding the door shut felt my weight on it and proceeded to slam me into the wall until I let go. When I fell to the floor, I scrambled on all fours to try and escape, but she caught my fingers in the door and started slamming them into the frame with the door until I screeched and ran away into the corner and pissed myself from crying and screaming so hard. This happened so many times, I had to get EMDR therapy just to be able to talk about it. I still have nightmares about it, and I can still smell the urine when I think about that room. Last year, a man jumped off a high-rise and landed right in front of me as I was entering my local grocery store. His partner came down and sat next to the body while crying. I called emergency and had to make a witness statement. One of the parts that stuck with me was that a crowd gathered and people began circling the body, recording it with their phones. I actually yelled at them to get away. I was so disgusted. Who on earth would you be trying to show that to? That poor man and his poor partner. I think about them all the time. I once saw a kid, maybe 13 years old. He was standing in the rear of a horse barn. All of a sudden, there was a large bang outside. I think it was a car or a tractor, but it sounded like a shotgun. At that moment, the house threw a kick that almost took the kid's head off. I thought he was dead. He had a divot in his forehead because his skull cracked. He now has to live out his life from an electronic wheelchair. Someone has to feed him and keep him clean, all because a tractor backfired. I can play the moment in my head. Poor kid. How the police and justice system made zero effort to prosecute the person who abused me at gunpoint. They subjected me to more than 10 interviews, made me collect CCTV on the event myself, and generally didn't seem to care. He was on parole for similar offenses and never got recalled to prison. If he had been, 2 other women who he abused later would not have had to been hurt. Every cloud has a silver lining, however, because now he has severe amnesia due to blunt force trauma.